Well, cars once made in Australia, like Holden and Ford, are being replaced by a wave of Chinese automakers. More than half a dozen have announced plans to sell electric vehicles here, and they'll be cheaper than almost anywhere else in the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to Studio 64. My name's David. I've been searching the interzones for more science, space and tech news to share with you, and I came across this over at rt.com. This should be entertaining. Yes, sales of Chinese cars topped those of US rivals for first time, according to a report. The Asian country's automaker sold over 13 million new vehicles globally, according to researcher Jato Dynamics. Yeah, Australia's being flooded now with cheap. I predicted this ages ago in videos where Australia's about to be flooded with cheap BYD Chinese vehicles, electric vehicles. The issue that we've got is, where's our infrastructure? And how? And people say, "Oh, you're a climate change denier, David." Bloody oath, I am. But let me tell you something here. You're going to flood us with cheap Chinese electric vehicles, and how are they going to be powered? Oh, we'll build lots of chargers, but where do the chargers get the power from? We can barely keep the lights on because of this green renewable energy bloody garbage that they've been pushing down our throats. You know, so what is the government doing now? They're finding out we're having big bloody power blackouts and all this stuff. So what do? Firing up the coal-fired power stations again. So your green vehicle, right, that's made with rare earth metals, you know, by child slave labour in Africa, right? And then when it bloody goes to China, it's 300 million more tons of coal pumped into the atmosphere just so they can produce these electric vehicles so they can sell them to Australians who, you know, I'll charge my electric car up and save the environment. Well, it's powered by a coal-fired power station with your Black Lives Matter sticker on it, driving around being morally superior. What a pack of dickheads. Chinese auto manufacturers sold more cars globally than their US counterparts for the first time ever in 2023, according to a report issued by researcher Jato Dynamics on Thursday. Now, data shows that Chinese brands, led by Shenzhen-based BYD, sold 13.43 million new vehicles last year, while US brands sold 11.93 million. Japanese brands maintained a strong position, leading with 23.59 million in global sales. Now, the report also indicated that China-origin companies' sales growth exceeded that of the US up to 23%. The previous year, compared with 9% growth for American firms. Now, negligence from legacy automakers, which has resulted in consistently high car prices, has inadvertently driven consumers towards a more affordable Chinese alternatives, said Philippe Munoz, senior analyst at Jato. As car prices continue to rise elsewhere, Chinese car brands are capitalizing on this trend to gain market traction at a much faster pace. Absolutely incredible. According to the report, the market share of Chinese car brands soared across regions such as the Middle East, Eurasia and Africa, while posting growth in Latin America and Southeast Asia. Chinese car brands also gained share in developed economies, including Europe, Australia, New Zealand and Israel. Yes, BYD's compact sedan, the Qin, I believe that's how you pronounce it, was the most popular Chinese model according to the Jato report. Yeah, now I'm going to drop in a little video here from Australian news from the last few days talking about these BYD electric vehicles and how it's having an effect, how the effect it's having on Australia. In 2017, we lost our car manufacturing industry. No Ford, no General Motors, just goodbye, everything's imported. You know, and it's completely insane. We need to get back to manufacturing in our own country and exporting. We used to export our General Motors branded vehicles, right, in Australia back in the day. And probably the Fords too, but now, not so much. All right, let's check out this video and then we'll carry on the conversation when we come out the other side.
Well, Well, cars once made in Australia, like Holden and Ford, are being replaced by a wave of Chinese automakers. More than half a dozen have announced plans to sell electric vehicles here, and they'll be cheaper than almost anywhere else in the world. Finance editor Chris Kohler reports.
A sea of electric cars all coming from one place. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese electric cars are now being bought each year in Australia, and the dam has burst. Many more are on the way. In the last month, 7 new Chinese car makers have announced they're on the way. Within the year, you'll see cars with these badges on Australian roads.
And it's not just Chinese brands, it's global brands building cars in China.
The battle is over. China is now the world's electric car powerhouse.
Year to date in 2024, over 80% of all electric vehicles sold in Australia were made in China.
And for political reasons, we're getting them cheaper than other countries. The death of the Australian car manufacturing industry has opened the door to the booming Chinese market. And Drive Director James Ward says that means value for buyers.
These cars are produced at such low costs and at high scale that the European and the US manufacturers can't actually compete like for like. So those governments are imposing tariffs on the importation of cars to protect their industry. We don't have an industry to protect, so the gates are open at the moment and Australian buyers are the ones who benefit.
This BYD Seal is a good example. It's selling in Australia for about $50,000. But if you were to buy it in Europe, you'd be spending more like $90,000 equivalent.
Well, frankly, that's a really, really good story for Australian buyers. We are taking advantage of the value that's being represented in these cars.
Chris Kohler, 9 News.
Well, that was a bit eye-opening, wasn't it? Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Again, we'll get flooded with electric vehicles, and between now and 2026, you'll get people driving around in a little vehicle going, where do I plug it in? Yeah, and then when you do get it plugged in, it's like, I'm doing great things for the environment. Meanwhile, there's a big, dirty, great big coal-fired power station in the background charging your car up. Fascinating. While the Chinese domestic market showed signs of deceleration, the country's manufacturers were searching for growth abroad. Now, Chinese brands have already been successful across emerging economies due to easier access policies, lower trade barriers, and higher price sensitivities among consumers, the report showed. Now, over 17.5 million new cars were sold in emerging economies in 2023. That's more than the total sales in the US or Europe during the year, Munoz pointed out. Yep, as I say, our politicians here in Australia are complete idiots, pushing towards a green economy and buy an electric vehicle. So people are going, well, we have to wait for the BYDs to come out because they're too expensive at the moment, as they set up in the here in the article, where it says negligence from legacy automakers, which has resulted in consistently high prices, has inadvertently driven consumers towards more affordable Japanese alternatives. Negligence from legacy automakers, as in they're being sued left, right and centre, so they've got to jack the car prices up to cover their legal costs. So people are going, give us the cheap Chinese ones. How are you going to power the damn things? Fascinating. Yes, here we go. Munoz pointed out that the growth reports added has come despite growing trade tensions between China and the West and other factors such as high interest rates and rising vehicle prices. Now, as usual, I'll leave the link to the main article below the video so you can pop in, check out embedded articles like this, US slaps steep tariffs on China. So if you want a bit of a deeper dive into that, it's very interesting. Now, this week, the EU hit China's electric vehicle makers with heavy tariffs of up to 38%. Beijing has warned it would target the bloc's aviation and agriculture sectors in response to these duties. Brussels' move followed the US having quadrupled tariffs on Chinese EVs to 100%. Turkey has also announced that 40% additional tariffs on vehicles from China over the weekend, drawing strong criticism from Beijing, which urged Ankara to immediately remove discriminatory duties. Yep, and in the United States, you have your automotive industry in worse trouble than ever because of the Chinese manufacturing electric vehicles in Mexico and rolling them across the border for you. Yeah. So that's going to decimate the US car industry. Our car industry is literally basically non-existent when it comes to manufacturing, literally non-existent. I mean, you're talking 7 years since we made a car in this country. It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. we need to start making cars again for Australian conditions. The reason we made our cars in the first place was simply because we'd be getting these little British 4-cylinder Morrises and all this sort of stuff, and they couldn't handle Australian conditions, long distances, rough roads, you know. That's why the 6-cylinder, your bog standard 6-cylinder V6, straight 6, sorry, with a, you know, either a manual or an automatic transmission was king, because it could handle long distances. You know, like they'd build them like tanks. Problem is the bodies would rust off when they first started to come out, but the motors would go forever. And we needed that here, particularly with some of the distances that Australians would travel. You know, the old expression about, you know, oh, it's a country mile. You know, it's only a mile away. Turns out it's 100 miles. All this sort of stuff. And these little Japanese cars, Chinese cars, I was right in the first place. These little Chinese cars, these electric cars, good luck getting them across our Nullarbor plain. Yes, you're talking, what, 1,000, 1,500 kilometres of straight road all in the middle of nowhere? Yeah, great. You want to go from one side of our country to another? You ain't going to do it one of those little BYD electric vehicles, I can tell you that. It's absolutely and positively ridiculous. Fascinating.
Fun fact. Nullarbor edition.
The Nullarbor Plain is a stretch of flat, arid country in South Australia, which covers a distance of 200,000 kilometres squared. At its widest point, it stretches from east to west across the Western Australian border, with a distance of 1,100 kilometres. The name Nullarbor comes from the term nullus arbor, which is Latin and means no trees, because if you look around, there are literally no trees here.
Yeah, fun fact.
So we're here at the Nullarbor Links, the world's longest 18-hole golf course, and it spans over 1,400 kilometres. Now check my form. Oh, that's heading for the green. Yeah, it looks good. So the concept of the course was born over a bottle of red at the Belladonna Roadhouse by a couple of blokes named Bob and Alf. So the average distance between each of the holes is 66 kilometres, and the furthest distance between two of the holes is 200 kilometres. Oh, that was a fun fact. Oh yeah, it's a fun fact. We're here in the Great Australian Bight, and the Bunda Cliffs here, they extend 200 kilometres between the head of the Bight and all the way down to the border with Western Australia. These cliffs are the southern edge of the limestone slab that makes up the Nullarbor Plain. So the lighter rock at the base of the cliffs, it's almost chalk-like, and this is Wilson Bluff limestone, and it was formed 65 million years ago as part of a sea floor when Australia was still attached to Antarctica. Oh yeah, it's a fun fact.
Fun fact. When you're cruising across the Nullarbor, you're actually driving on the Eyre Highway, which is 1,675 kilometres and home to Australia's straightest stretch of road. It was named after Edward John Eyre, who first crossed the Nullarbor Plain on horseback in 1841. It took 2 attempts, a mutiny, bushcraft, and the help of a local Indigenous man to make the crossing. Fun fact.
All right, well, my name is David. Thanks for joining me for another Studio 64 Science, Space and Tech News update. I shall see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're up for it, drop a comment down below the video. I'd love to hear what you think. All right, take care. And as I always say, if you can't be good at it. And as I also always say,
I'll be back.